Oh, good. Great. How about that? Good, thanks.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Second, okay, all in favor? Of approving the meeting minutes? Okay, any no's? Any abstentions? Okay. Great,
Thank you.
excellent, thank you. Forestry report.
Right, good morning all, good to see you. Quite a few things. 6 to be exact, but one of them has 3 things in it. 4 things. So first, here are some updates. Ashley Reese, who has worked with you all for quite a while, she has moved to a different position in urban forestry. She's now over on our planting. We won't be seeing her here.
Is she okay?
Yes, she is okay. Thank you for asking. Also, since the last Forestry Commission meeting, City Council delisted heritage tree number 26 and approved the fiscal year 23-24 tree regulation fee schedule changes. And last of these brief updates, that although the state legislative session is currently suspended due to a lack of quorum, work on House Bill 3414 has continued. The bill was recently amended so as not to exempt tree and certain other nature regulations in property development situations. There may be more action on that to come, but this is progress. My second item today is a little information and background for something training we're gonna have today. The goals for the Urban Forestry Commission include being a representative body for Portlanders and the urban forest and functioning constructively with inclusivity and respect for all, including staff, commissioners, and visitors. I'm pleased to see the current commission, you all, developing a community agreement to promote safe, inclusive, and diverse organization culture. And since 2012, which was the start of my service, the Forestry Commission's composition has improved from 9% of commissioners identifying as people of color to 27%, and from 27% women to 63% women. Also, several trainings have been held at commission meetings over the years, and training opportunities have also been made available to commissioners. And Urban Forestry continues to work to educate and equip commission members for these goals. And you can expect training at future Urban Forestry Commission meetings and other training opportunities to be shared with you. And one of those opportunities that was provided, so nothing, we didn't do the training here, but you all had an invitation, was very recent, and I believe at least one commissioner attended. I think it was Commissioner Jordan. Today's agenda includes one of those trainings. It's actually required for all city staff and advisory committee members, among others. My third item, so the new funds from the 5-year Parks Operations Levy, as you know, have enabled significant improvements of Portland's urban forest due to increased urban forestry program staff capacity. So as discussed in previous commission meetings, there are specific areas of improvement thanks to the 5-year operations levy, and those include providing routine care for park trees for the first time ever, following up on permit conditions and tree code compliance, also consistently for the first time ever. It's been piecemeal at best in the past due to lack of capacity. And a third area of focus for levy funds has been significantly increasing tree planting focused in priority areas, which is low canopy, low income, and BIPOC neighborhoods of the city. So you know all that. Here's something that might not be as obvious, but consequently, sufficient staff workspace has become a real challenge in the urban forestry program. Therefore, the non-development tree regulation team will be moving from urban forestry at East Delta Park to a new location at Southwest 1900 4th Avenue. They'll be based there with the tree technicians and the development tree regulation teams. They've already been working out of there for a long time. Also, the tree inventory team has already moved from East Delta Park to this building, Portland building, joining some planning and administration staff who are based here. So these are really big changes for our team to navigate. Some of the folks who are moving have worked for literally decades in their former locations. And with certain colleagues there for years, and are now having to really make big adjustments. So I just wanted to make you aware of that being in the background. Fourth item. In the past, I've shared with you all information on the City of Portland's involvement, led by Urban Forestry, as a partner in the National Vanguard Cities Coalition. Reminder, the coalition promotes urban forestry as central to urban heat reduction and community development, equitable community development. That work now includes a team from Portland participating in an urban nature-based solutions accelerator. And the purpose of that accelerator is to better integrate trees into cities and advance equity and environmental justice needs through urban forestry. So our team from Portland includes leaders from Portland State University's urban heat folks, namely Vivek Chandas, Multnomah County Public Health and Climate Crisis Response Supervisor, Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center. That's a tree and nature workforce development nonprofit, among other things in the city. Also, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability Urban Planning Manager and the Portland Clean Energy Fund Manager is involved. So that's the team. Last month, when Chief Policy Analyst Melody Brooks was here, she shared with you that the accelerator has been helpful in applying for Inflation Reduction Act funds, and the program is a productive national networking and best practices resource. And that program will continue into the fall. And at some point, someone had questions about that, so I wanted to share that information with you. I'll take a pause there before I go on to the next couple items.
What was the full program name?
It is, there's two programs, like an umbrella program called Vanguard Cities. And within that, and now running under Vanguard Cities, is the Urban Nature-Based Solutions Accelerator. It's being called the accelerator.
What is it accelerating?
Accelerating better design of cities so that urban heat can be mitigated by trees, and environmental justice and inequities can be addressed through urban forestry as well, from a community development perspective. Yeah, good question. The idea is to get a lot of people who work in those fields together nationally, meeting regularly and hearing lectures and presentations, and then having discussions and work sessions. And then the core teams, cities have teams that are working on those same things. I'll go on to the next thing. Parks Urban Forestry is pleased to be part of a $17 million application to the USDA Urban and Community Forestry Program under the Inflation Reduction Act to increase tree benefits and services to priority communities in East Multnomah County. That application was just submitted last week, Brian, before?
Yeah, June 3rd or 4th, yeah.
3rd or 4th, right. So this is the big IRA funding we've all been hearing about. This is our second foray into that world. Friends of Trees is the lead applicant, with Parks Urban Forestry joining the City of Gresham, Apano, the Black Parent Initiative, Columbia Slough Watershed Council, Connecting Canopies, DPAVE, Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center, POIC, Verde, and Wisdom of the Elders as contributing partners. If awarded, the 5-year grant will support community outreach, education, tree planting and establishment, maintenance, tree maintenance, and job training in East Portland and Gresham. For Urban Forestry's contribution to the project, we requested staff capacity to integrate the upcoming Street Tree Maintenance Fund, which is part of PSEF, $5 million from the PSEF fund, into the collaborative project. The community engagement and outreach will help to inform the design of that maintenance program and ensure that it delivers benefits for historically underserved communities and low canopy areas. And as has been discussed here frequently, the cost of maintenance of trees is the primary reason residents do not plant trees. From national studies, published papers, and our own surveys and feedback in urban forestry. Let's see. Yeah, providing financial support for mature tree maintenance is an essential component of a holistic approach to expanding the urban canopy. Additionally, urban forestry has requested funding to respond to the arrival of emerald ash borer in the region. That's part of the proposal as well. Thanks to our street tree inventory and the many volunteers who make it happen, we've identified 450 ash street trees, which are good candidates for inoculation based on their size and health. And inoculation for this particular pest is very effective. So we're requesting funding for 2 rounds of inoculation, which will provide 6 years of protection against EAB. While we expect to find out in October whether this proposal has been awarded, plans are already underway for ongoing collaboration among the partners, continuing to build relationships and coordinate our efforts. Last item for you all. There have been some questions and also media coverage about tree removal in the Outer Powell Boulevard redevelopment project in Southeast Portland. So I'm going to give you information about that now. So that road is state property. State property is exempt from Title 11 trees from Portland's tree code. State roads are managed by the Oregon Department of Transportation. So they're the ones leading that redevelopment project. Because Outer Powell is a state route, urban forestry has little authority in the case. The only authority Title 11 gives us in the city is on private properties that are part of the project. Anything that's in the road surface, the sidewalks, the curbs, there's no authority that the city has there. However, urban forestry works with ODOT in these situations whenever we can find the opportunity to preserve and plant trees, and we are involved in the Outer Powell project. Consequently, while 572 trees are slated for removal, 457 are planned to be retained, 120 trees will be planted, and ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation, has paid almost $180,000 fee in lieu, which, as you know, goes to the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund, which, as you also know, urban forestry uses to plant and establish trees in priority neighborhoods according to the city's tree planting strategy, growing a more equitable urban forest. I also wanted to note that this case is one of 10 to 12,000 handled by urban forestry's permitting and regulation team each year. And this project started in 2020 and is expected to continue into 2027. Tree establishment will likely go past that. So that gives you the idea of how big one project out of up to 12,000 are. So I'll conclude by saying thank you to the urban forestry regulatory team, which is comprised of tree inspectors, tree technicians, supervisory staff, and their manager, Casey Jokerst, for their extensive everyday efforts on behalf of trees, people, and Portland's essential forest infrastructure. Without them implementing the regulations wouldn't be applied. That's my report. Do you have a question?
Yes. Can you share the plans, even if they're preliminary, with us for the Outer Powell project?
That is a good question. Is Casey here?
Yeah, let me, Casey's here. I'm gonna bring her into the meeting, actually. Casey, if you're available.
Find out.
Yeah, there you go.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. I can check with the development supervisor and the tree inspector on those plans, again, because it's something that we don't sort of have full regulatory authority over. I'm not sure exactly what we have, but I'll definitely look into it and I can send it along to Jen to share what we do have.
Thank you. And that supervisor is Jot Lehochski.
Would it seems like a good opportunity. I don't know where the yard tree or free yard tree giveaway program is focusing in the fall or whenever it's happening, but it seems like it would be a good PR opportunity and also appropriate if that was staged somewhere in close proximity to where the trees are being lost along Powell, as well as the I'm not sure again where the street tree program is going to be focused in the upcoming year, but it seems like that would also be a good area to focus that program on. I'm not sure how many sidewalks and curbs there are in the neighborhoods adjacent to Powell, but it would be a good opportunity to convey to the community there that we're aware that there's a loss. We're doing what we can, and here's what we have some control over. But I don't know, those kind of programs may be years in advance, but I think it would be really a good opportunity to convey to the community where there are no neighborhood associations, that this is an effort on the part of urban forestry to address a difficult situation.
Thank you,
That's a good
Commissioner
thought.
Mills.
So thank you for that report. I'm aware of a fair bit of community concern about the removal of the trees on Outer Powell. And I understand the city's leverage or lack thereof on this project, but I know that there's a lot of questions out there of whether trees were considered early in the design process, kind of like the relationship between ODOT and perhaps Oregon Department of Forestry's urban forest program, and to the extent to which it might have been or might be possible to design the safety improvements that are so needed out there. I mean, this project, the goals of this project are really critical to the community too. Just what kind of collaboration is your perception between state agencies about, or others, about how to integrate trees, and might there be design options even now that could potentially result in being able to retain some of those trees, because planting those trees, it's going to take decades for them to provide the type of ecosystem services that these trees provide.
Doing on time.
I think we're fine, yeah.
I wonder, thank you, Commissioner Jordan. Casey, if you heard that, would you be, I'm sorry, Manager Joe Gerst, would you be interested in responding?
Sure. I was just looking through my folder, and it dates all the way back to 2014 in terms of conversations about this project. So I can say that we have been quite engaged and involved, but again, because they are not required to follow our regulations, we can't necessarily control what they ultimately decide. But we have been engaged on quite a few different levels and at the very, very early stages, again, dating back to 2014 in my files.
Commissioner Lilly?
Yeah, just to speak to, I think, engaging with the East Portland Parks Coalition, as well as the East Portland Land Use and Transportation Committee, are two areas that are good to involve in the community engagement process. I know that at least with the division project, when they told us they were, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but they said we were going to get X amount of trees at the beginning and slowly lower down. It was like over 100 trees. And now I think what they ended up planting was 40 trees. And that was just, and then to make up the difference, in nearby neighborhoods, there was opportunities for community members to plant trees, street trees, to sort of make up that difference. And the city would provide the trees, but only a certain amount of years of maintenance come with that. And beyond that, the responsibility of maintaining those trees falls on the burden of the community. Whereas if those trees were planted on the street, would be maintained by the city. So I just raising awareness for my fellow commissioners on, it's not, there's not, one way to address the problem, but I think I enjoy being creative and thinking about some of these things and learning from some of those moving forward.
I was having some similar thoughts about, okay, what's the larger strategic issue? How could we make this better? I was thinking about it sort of in the flip way, meaning that it sounded like in some ways you were very successful on the Powell project in kind of changing around the planned number of trees that are going to be cut and so forth. And so how actually has that evolved over time? I would guess that with your increased staff, you have much more ability to be successfully engaged with these partners and have better outcomes for trees. Is that the case? Or, what do you still see as sort of strategic areas that we could, be more effectively involved?
Thanks for that question. The staff increases that we have really been recent, so we're still getting positioned to hopefully see better outcomes from that. Ultimately, it comes down to regulations and how much we're able to do. That said, our team is always working to do everything possible, and the division project that Commissioner Lilly mentioned is a good example. The community tree planting in the area was a result of us pushing for a memorandum of agreement with the Bureau of Transportation because there were so few trees put into division. And I know our team worked extensively and exhaustively to try to influence the design of that road so more street trees would be in it. So there's an illustration of didn't work out that well. So work in progress. And I would like to give Casey, the Manager Jogers, the opportunity to comment on that if she'd like.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I do just want to say that this type of a project that we're talking about is a capital project, and we're still working on getting to a full cost recovery as it relates to our work and development. And so a lot of the staffing increases that we've seen have actually been allocated to our non-development teams. So we still have work to do in terms of increasing those staffing levels for development. That's not to say that we're still not extremely engaged, and we've had some increases in personnel such as Belinda, who I see here, who we now are fortunate enough to get in on these types of projects really early on before regulations really even come into play. And that's been a significant improvement. So that's all I just wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I was going to echo exactly what Casey said. Is one of the benefits of having Linda, our planning and policy analyst, is that Linda is able to be involved in projects sort of before the design stage, as the sort of in the conceptual development part of it, and that is ongoing with several projects such as PBOT's work redoing the streetscape on 122nd Avenue and the work on 82nd Avenue, which there's a lot of funding and potential for improvements on that stretch as well. Those are two projects that we're talking with PBOT about bringing to the UFC to look at what some of the preliminary designs are. But sort of as Casey noted, the permitting regulation role is often about ensuring that the project complies with code. But with Belinda in the planning role, that allows us to influence the project and be engaged sort of before the permitting and plan review stage. So our two work groups work closely on that, but that is an example of having more capacity allows us to be involved a little bit earlier than we have been.
That said, I'm appreciating Commissioner Lilly's comments about organizations, community groups to involve in the area. And city projects do that. More is always better, in my opinion and my experience. And very early stages is when advocacy around tree retention, protection and planning is most effective. So we have Belinda, and that's wonderful. It is still a work in progress.
Excellent. Any other questions? Thoughts? I actually had one other thought as you were talking, and that was like, okay, so I've been on the commission a couple of years, and I'm not sure I understand even yet what all your teams do. I'm sure that was part of the orientation for the new commissioners, but and so it might be just a nice thing to include really, because, you know, there's just all these surprise areas that you're all involved in, so.
Yes. We were just talking about this yesterday, actually,
you?
of lining
Okay.
up a series, particularly with a lot of commissioners who have joined in the last 2 years.
Uh-huh.
Bruce is actually following up on your question when we were reviewing the fee schedule of what are all these fees and permits and how do they correlate with the work that we do? And so yes, we are talking amongst managers of seeing Commissioner Lilly saying a field trip would be great as well. Yes, agreed. And you've seen some of this stuff like in action, but yeah, we are putting together sort of a calendar of the next few meetings of how we can have presentations on specific work groups, just a little bit more in depth on what the city's urban forestry program does. And then, yeah, I think having a site visit, see some of the real world examples of this would be great.
Sounds good.
Can we have input on where we go?
Yeah, oh, for sure. I think that'd be great. I think that's where it should come from. Like, because it could be an example of a successful project. It could be an example of something commissioners have seen play out poorly and good thing for us to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Great. Okay, well, it looks like our next presenter is on the call. Kathy Sharp, who's going to talk to us about workplace harassment, discrimination, racism, and retaliation prevention training. So welcome and thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'll just go ahead and get started. Like I was introduced, my name is Kathy Sharp and I'm an HR business partner for the city of Portland, and I support parks and recreation. And so staff asked me to come and just give an overview of the city's rule on prohibition of workplace harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. I have a few slides. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go through the slides. There is about 10 of them, and I'll just go through the presentation. It should take me about 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions, and staff and I can answer questions for you. Anything anybody wants to share before I get started? And I'll share my screen. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen then. Can somebody give me a thumbs up that they can see the screen?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, as I said, today we're here to talk about the workplace harassment, discrimination, racism, and retaliation prevention. This is a city rule that we've had for quite some time, and Brian asked me to come and talk to you about it based on your roles as commissioners. And so I'm gonna give you a policy overview, talk about who's covered by the rule, give some examples of prohibited conduct, and then what you should do if this conduct does happen, and who to contact and report violations of the rule. Before we get started, I want to do a quick overview of the city's core values. In June of 2020, City Council formally adopted the 6 core values that are depicted on the screen here of anti-racism, equity, transparency, communication, collaboration, and fiscal responsibility. These reflect not only what we do, but how we do it. And there's expectation for city employees and other groups representing the city to follow our city core values. The inner circle are the core values that I described. And then the outer circle is how we put the values into action. For example, the value of collaboration. At the city, we live into this value by intentional inclusion, peer support, training, and teamwork. And as you can see, we've identified actions for each one of the core values. Under anti-racism, that addresses issues concerning anti-Blackness, which is a priority for the workforce in the city, with a focus on actions to dismantle institutional and systemic racism, and will be the responsibility of every employee and volunteer. So basically, the intent here is that racism, discrimination, and bias will not be tolerated within the workplace or within our communities. And equity, here we are acknowledging Oregon's history of exclusion, and we are dedicated to rebuilding trust and reconciliation and restorative justice through solidarity and the preservation of diverse communities and their cultures. We will have equity, access, and the removal of institutional and systemic barriers to resources and opportunities, which is essential to diversifying our workforce and the public good. And then transparency is essential to upholding the principles of democracy and reimagining political processes occurring through accountability. Portland wants to develop a culture of information sharing and trust so we can establish and maintain integrity and inclusion in our processes. Communication is a knowledge sharing is impactful in our workplace and communities. For example, the art of storytelling and narratives can promote a culture of inclusion and give power to our collective voices that will unify our city. And then collaboration provides our belief that we are better together, collaborating and co-creating knowledge, which is the nexus of political and public service that connects our workforce and our communities. And lastly, fiscal responsibility. The city of Portland is dedicated to being fiscally accountable to the public and having fiscal resiliency, climate action, equity, and a focus on the needs of our most vulnerable populations. So why do we have this rule? We have the rule because the impact that harassment, racism, discrimination, and retaliation has on our employees, volunteers, and commissioners like yourself is our number one concern. The city of Portland is committed to creating a respectful, inclusive, equitable, and professional work environment that promotes equal opportunities and is free of harassment, discrimination, racism, and retaliation. As a commissioner of the Urban Forestry Commission, the work that you perform directly impacts the lives of constituents, and the duty is high to perform these duties in an inclusive and equitable manner. I'm just going to pause for just a second and give everyone an opportunity to be a little bit introspective and just think of a time when you were in a workplace or a group and you did not feel included. I'm just going to pause. As you think about that experience and the feelings that may have come back up for you or that you experienced back then, those feelings are the reason that we have this rule. And our goal is that employees and volunteers not feel this way. It's the city's policy to prohibit workplace harassment, discrimination, racism, and retaliation based on protected status. So everyone is a member of a protected status. Everyone has a gender, a race, an age. And so you'll see the whole list here up on the screen of the different protected statuses. So when we're looking at HR 2.02, we shorten up the rule. It's a long name, right? And so we call it HR 2.02 here, employees at the city and in HR. And when we're looking at these types of complaints, we're looking at the behavior as it relates to a protected class. And none of these rules create a special rights, but they do ensure that equal rights for everyone. And so many of these protected statuses may be familiar to you, and some of them may be newer for you. like source of income. It was designed to prevent discrimination in housing. However, it would also prohibit harassment or failure to hire someone because like they live in subsidized housing. Marital status is a spouse or lack thereof. Familial can be family or having children or lack of children. And then a newer aspect of a protected class is a non-religious affiliation, and that's a protected status. And then age in the federal law is that making is over 40, right? And in Oregon, it's there's protection for anyone over 18. So when you're participating on the Urban Forestry Commission and representing the city of Portland, you need to monitor how you act, how you think, and how you speak. Your personal values may contradict with the values of the city, other urban forestry commissioners, and the city employees. But in the end of the day, the city values take precedent. So, as I said, we're going to talk about who's covered by the rule. So elected officials, employees, interns, volunteers like yourself, commissioners, applicants for employment with the city of Portland, and contractors who are providing services to Portland. They're all covered under the rule. And so let's talk about some of the specific terms that are included in the rule. So harassment. Harassment is inappropriate or derogatory verbal or physical conduct or showing hostility towards someone related to their protected status. And one thing I do want to mention is that intent or consent doesn't matter. If someone tells a joke based on someone's protected class, and then they say, I was just kidding, I didn't mean it that way, or I didn't mean that as an insult, or that it doesn't matter your intent. The joke is the joke, and it doesn't meet our standard and it is against the rule. So it would include racial or ethnic slurs or epithets, hate speech, or any other offensive remarks, jokes, pranks, banter, including stereotyping, threats or intimidation, and then inappropriate verbal, which graphic or physical contact. This is also just an opportunity to talk just a minute about gossip, because during a commission meeting, if a commissioner, well, we talked about the jokes, but I just want to talk a minute about gossip, and it can really be harmful. As you know, if you've ever been the source of having people gossip about you, it can be really debilitating to a group, a work group, or even a social group or a commission like yourself. So it's really important that people's personal stories stay their own personal stories to share, and that we not gossip about things in the workplace. And then there's also the concept of bullying and discourteous behavior, and that has a real negative impact on the work environment. And bullying is intentional verbal or nonverbal conduct by an individual against another individual over a period of time. And bullying behavior is the continuous and systematic conduct that may intimidate, threaten, or offend another person. So again, that's harmful gossip, behavior that demeans, humiliates, or intimidates others in the workplace, deliberate exclusion from another employee's work or volunteer's work assignments or network that is not due to a legitimate business reason. And it would be threats or emotional or physical violence and verbal or physical behavior that is derogatory or abusive. Sexual harassment is a specific type of harassment that includes unwanted sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other sexual-oriented verbal or physical conduct. In some cases, sexual harassment is about power. The person wielding it who sexually harasses the person who doesn't have the power. most typical examples of power imbalance are in the workplace is junior staff members subject to unwelcome advances by a supervisor or more senior staff member. But the bottom line is any action or words with a sexual connotation that interferes with an employee or volunteer's ability to work or creates an uncomfortable atmosphere are considered sexual harassment. So discrimination is the unequal treatment of an individual in any personnel action based on a protected status. Again, discrimination usually generally implies a power imbalance between the person being discriminated against and the person doing the discriminating. It can be denial or exclusion from information or meetings that could impact successful performance, or collusion with another person to treat someone negatively based on a protective status. And then racism is also a form of discrimination and or harassment. The city is committed to prohibiting racism in the workplace and dismantling institutional and structural racism. Just a couple of examples of racism are referring to a Hispanic person as you people, racial slurs, racist jokes or cartoons or stereotyping, applying expectations to a person based on a stereotype about their race. Like Asians are good at math, so we should give them all the hard, analysis and analytical things. Black men are more athletic, so we should give them assignments where there's more intense work to be done. Workplace harassment, I've talked about discrimination, racism, and it's all, I'm talking about it in regards to protected class and in the workplace setting. And so at the city, harassment, discrimination, racism, and retaliation are prohibited in the workplace or any work-related setting outside the workplace, or when off-duty conduct creates a negative work environment based on a protected status. So it's in buildings owned by the city, vehicles owned by the city, events held or paid for by the city, places where you're representing the city. It could be at a conference. If you're representing the city in another meeting offsite, that would also HR 2.02 would apply. And also when you're working from home, like I'm working from home this morning and I'm teleworking, but it still applies to me. HR 2.02 and our rule still applies to me. And so now I just want to take a minute and address what you can do if you see or experience prohibited behavior. You can respond to the person and ask them to stop if you feel comfortable doing so. As commissioners, you can report observed or felt behavior to the Urban Forestry Commissioner co-chairs or city staff supporting the commission. And we hope that you'll always ask for the support you need to be able to contribute to the Urban Forestry Commission. And so with that, that's the end of my presentation. And so I'll stop sharing my screen. Thanks for your time and attention on that. I know it's not the most fun topic to talk about, but it's an important one. We do this training with employees when they're newly hired, and it's a 2-hour training with employees. And then we do a follow-up 1-hour refresher at least every 3 years. So we do feel like it's, and we ask people to, we remind people about the rule as needed more frequently than that. So I see Megan, did I say that right? Megan and Dara Lee have questions.
Yeah.
So
Kathy, I have two questions. One is, just, I'd love for you to speak about what happens if somebody brings something forward. Like, I think sometimes I help run a nonprofit organization, and I know that employees will say, I don't want to bring things forward unless I know there's accountability systems to that. So
Yeah.
I'd love to know what that means. And also, you know, as someone that is in a leadership role in my job, I know that sometimes maybe the person that they're frustrated with is in fact me. So what if the very person you should report to is not the person you would feel comfortable with? Then what is your course of action?
Yeah. So the person that you should report to is indeed the person that you're frustrated or have the complaint about. Then you would go to the next level. Like if you're the commission co-chair, then you would go to city staff, right? So you'd move up to city staff. If it was city staff that you were having, that you were needing to talk to somebody about a behavior or something that occurred, then you would go to their boss, right? You would move that up. So if you're talking about Jen Cairo, for instance, you would take that to Adina Long, the director Long, right? I hear what you're saying when you say accountability, right? If somebody doesn't want to be vulnerable and bring forward a concern, if there's not going to be accountability, because it's a brave space, right? To have to come up and say, I feel like I've been being harassed based on this protected class, or I feel like I'm being discriminated against based on a protected class. But as a commission and as a volunteers, the process is a little bit different. The staff member who took the complaint, they would look into that. They would do a brief investigation. They would look into the issue, and then they would consider what the right course of action would be, right? In the city with an employee, we would investigate, and then we would determine if there was any appropriate action, say a disciplinary action that might take. But as commissioners and volunteers at the city, we don't discipline commissioners and volunteers, right? So it would be a little bit different. We'd have Jen, Brian, the other staff, and you as the co-leaders would need to identify what those next steps would be and what that would look like. Could be a facilitated conversation to try to bring, that around to have people understand what the behavior was or is, and what the impacts are, and what harm is being caused, right? And then ask for a change in behavior. That could be one remedy. Did I answer your question? Okay, great. And Daralee, did I say your name right?
You did, thank you, Kathy. So at the beginning of the slide, it says that it's an interim rule from 2020. Has it since been implemented, or are we expecting updates and changes?
It is still an interim rule, and we should expect some updates and changes over time. One of the considerations is there's some information about microaggressions that needs to be added, and I will just tell you that it was being updated, and then we had the pandemic, and I know we can blame a lot of things on the pandemic, but we just haven't gotten back to it. We do have someone the city has someone who is getting started on that project again. So we could expect some changes to happen. Thank you for that. And I'll also put in the chat, I'll copy a link to the city's full rule, right? We have a full rule. You're welcome to read it. As you read through it, it pertains to all the volunteers, employees, elected officials, all those. But as you read through it, a lot of the information pertains mostly to employees. That's our widest audience, but you're welcome to read it. And I'll put that in the chat for everyone to see, so that you can read the full rule should you choose.
So question in the room, Commissioner Nelson.
There was a slide that listed the protected classes, and there was an asterisk next to mental abilities and something else. And I didn't catch if you said why they had an asterisk.
I didn't, but I do have an answer for you. So it was for religious reasons and for mental or physical disability. And I usually call that out when I'm talking to employees, because we have a separate policy on ADA accommodations or meeting accommodations in the workplace for a mental or physical disability. And then if somebody needs a religious accommodation in their work, we have a policy around that, and people can, they can actually put in requests and be considered for those accommodations. Thanks for asking that and noting that.
McMillan?
In your definition of terms, I was hoping for a definition of retaliation. Could you go over that, you know, what the city considers retaliation?
So generally retaliation at the city, retaliation is detrimental actions that are being taken against an employee for participating in an investigation or for making a report. So I can see my slides missed that. Thank you for bringing that. And so retaliation would be if someone brought a complaint forward, the person or other people who know that this complaint is drawn forward, they start taking negative actions. It could be bullying, it could be harassment, it could be discrimination against that person based on their complaint. And that is also prohibited conduct.
I have a question. So, you know, we as a commission, we meet monthly and it's not that frequent. And sometimes if issues come up, they may be best dealt with in the moment. Can you talk a little bit about that, sort of best practices on communication around that and so forth?
I'm going to tread lightly here, I think, but you're talking about holding somebody accountable for an action that would happen in a commission meeting,
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I believe that the best practice would be that you would have ground rules about how you're going to treat one another and what that's going to look like. Some team agreements is what some of our employees have. They have team agreements when they're having staff meetings. They agree to the terms and how they're going to treat others. I think that's best practice. What I wouldn't want to see is, what would not be best practice would be calling people out, embarrassing them, stopping a meeting and making it all about someone. You could ask somebody to step outside like if you were meeting in a commission, if there was something that happened that was really upsetting and you wanted to stop, you could ask the person to step aside, or on a break, you could talk to them. But we wouldn't use, a public forum to admonish someone for their behavior. You could ask somebody to stop, right? If there's something happening in a moment that is quite harmful, you could maybe ask them to stop. You could also, if you were triggered by something somebody said, you could get up and take a break, right? As best practice, move away from it and then report that to staff or one of the co-chairs during a break. Jen, Brian, do you have anything else, or the co-chairs, did you have anything else that you would like to add to that? Because that's really your commission, right? And how you handle it.
Just so you know. Oops, Kathy, sorry, don't take yourself off mute. The commission is working on a community agreement, very similar to what you just mentioned. And I wanted to personally appreciate the distinction you made about not calling people out, and instead addressing anything that might come up, unless it is something really dire that needs to be addressed in real time in a different venue that's more private. And there's a practice also called calling in rather than calling out, which is really trying to connect with a person who may be struggling with behaving and using vocabulary that's really inclusive and not exclusive, and helping them learn and change their behavior rather than shaming them for it.
Yeah.
And we are planning on more training and training opportunities around inclusivity and equity and respectful workplace. So those things might come up there.
Great, and I see there's a question, but also Leah made a good comment, Commissioner Black, about, when is our next retreat? And is this the kind of thing that we could talk about if it makes sense there? Do we have a retreat date or should we?
Yeah, we don't have one scheduled right now, but that's something for us to start
Something
looking
to think
at.
about.
It's great.
Commissioner Bechtel.
I have 2 points. First, retaliation can also be omission acts where retaliating against someone, for example, if a commission member, if they weren't sent meeting invites or they were excluded from emails or something, it can also lead to retaliation or amount to retaliation. If you are icing someone out and hindering their ability to meaningfully participate in their work. And then the second point, to tack on to what Leah put in the chat, there's a subgroup that put together some community guidelines, and I'll be giving you an update later in this meeting.
Great comments, right? It can be really hard on someone if they're being excluded, right? I talked a minute about that, but you said it so much better, Daralee, is, if you're not giving people the information that they need to do their work, right? That can be seen as retaliatory based on, because you disagree with them, right? You have a different view of opinion, or that they're looking at an item one way or another, but excluding them from the conversation to avoid hearing what they have to say, that could certainly be retaliatory, or to make them look like they're not engaged, right? That could be considered retaliatory. And Leah, looks like you have a question.
Yeah, just more of a comment. I'm just thinking about calling attention to the difference between calling someone out and directing it at that person, but versus interrupting harmful actions or language, because I think we want to encourage interrupting. But sometimes the difference can feel the line can feel very unclear, because it can feel like a personal attack when someone's trying to interrupt something that they think is really harmful. So that's something maybe we can address more when we have that conversation and continue to work on those norms. But I just think that's important to point out, that hopefully we're encouraging people to interrupt what they think is harmful policy or harmful language, but how do we define what's interrupting versus like a attack on somebody?
Very valid. And yes, I'm excited and interested that you guys are going to work on community agreements. And, from this conversation and the contributions, I know it might be difficult conversation, but you seem all up to the task. So I think it will only benefit the commission in a positive way.
Yeah, one last question. We're kind of out of time, but brief.
May we get a copy of your slide presentation? I read the rule, but I find this to be, there was some good stuff in there and it's more user-friendly.
Yeah, I will, I'll have to do some cleanup. When I went to print it, it got kind of messy. So I will work on that, and I'll get that to Brian, and he can distribute that. But I did put the rule in the chat. And so as I come to close, I'm a minute over. Thank you for your time and your attention. Appreciate it. And we'll talk again sometime, maybe. See you later. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, next item is urban forest plan update, and Belinda Judelman will be presenting that. Welcome again, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just gonna share my screen. Let's see. Can you all see the slide deck appropriately?
Yes.
Excellent. So hi, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces, and I think there's a few new commissioners. So for those I haven't met yet, good to meet you. I'm Belinda Udelman, and I'm the Planning and Policy Analyst with Urban Forestry. So today I'm going to spend a few slides giving you an update on where we're at with the Urban Forest Plan update process, and then we'll use the rest of the time to discuss the UFC's or Urban Forestry Commission's role in that process and how you would like to be engaged moving forward. So just a quick refresher on what is the Urban Forest Plan. Hopefully you're all very familiar with it. But as a reminder, it's a comprehensive framework of goals, policies, and actions that guide city management activities and decisions that impact the urban forest. And as of 2011 or 2015 with the tree code, it's a 10-year plan with short and long-term priorities. And so the current urban forest management plan is from 2004. So we are very ripe for an update. So that's what we're working on now. So where are we with the update process? So back in the September, in the fall and winter, I was working with urban forestry staff, planning and engagement staff within parks, also with BPS, and also with folks on the commission at that time to develop a scope for the process of updating the plan, and then also turning that into a request for proposals. Because we decided that we wanted to engage a consultant, an outside consultant, to help with both the technical analysis and then most importantly, the community engagement. So we've been working with our city's procurement team to help run through that process. And so we're still in it. So I can't tell you, who our consultant team is at this time, but we hope to wrap that up within the next 2 weeks or so. So then July and August, we can start really kicking off the project and get started with it. And then we'll work on developing the plan from the rest of 2023, all of 2024, and then if we need it, a little bit of 2025. So that will take us to developing the plan. And then before we get into talking about what the commission's role is with the urban forest plan and how you want to be engaged, I just want to provide a little bit of context about where the commission fits in with other advisory committees and activities that we'll be doing during the urban forest plan update to engage community and stakeholders. So first we'll have the Urban Forestry Commission. All of you will be providing input, and I'll get into the details of that in a moment. Then we are also going to have a technical advisory committee, and this committee is made up of staff from other bureaus. I think we have pretty much confirmed representation from every single bureau in the city, which is great. And there'll also be some regional and state agency partners as well. And then we will have a community advisory committee. We'll be made up of diverse community members to make sure that we're hearing from a variety of voices as we develop this plan, and also to provide sort of a direct line of communication between those community members and the project team, so we can have a lot more in-depth back and forth and making sure we're really responding to community as we develop the plan. So we'll be prioritizing community members as when we select community members and participants for that advisory committee that have mixed incomes, live in low canopy areas. So hopefully getting a significant of participation from people living in East Portland, people with different racial and ethnic backgrounds and different life experiences. And we'll have more information as we move through that recruitment process. So then a significant amount of our outreach effort will be to engage groups who've been historically underserved and who may not feel comfortable or interested in participating in a sort of standard typical city planning process. So this will be an opportunity for us to meet people where they are and kind of create or join a space that's comfortable for those groups, so that we can discuss their values and concerns and priorities for urban forest management in a space that's comfortable for them. And then last, as with sort of any citywide planning process, we'll have a broader public engagement set of activities, and that we can also use that as an opportunity to engage some of the stakeholders that we might not be hearing from in some of those other groups. So for the Urban Forestry Commission's role in the Urban Forest Plan, so Title 11, our tree code, actually specifically gives the commission a role in this process. So you are encouraged to have a role in helping to develop and update and implement the plan. So more specifically, what that looks like is providing feedback on sort of all elements of the plan. So back in the fall, you had an opportunity to provide feedback on the scope of work. And then moving forward, we'll be coming to you for your feedback on the outreach strategy, vision and goals, urban forest management challenges and opportunities, and sort of our assessment of what we have and what we want. Working on the canopy targets, our recommendations and priorities, and then the draft urban forest plan itself. So in addition to providing feedback on all of those items in the plan, we'll also be coming to you to ask for your help to help promote our engagement activities that are open to the general public to help spread the word. And you'll also be invited to participate in any of those activities if you'd like. And then once the plan is adopted or finished, that'll be your opportunity to help us implement it moving forward. So before we move into our discussion, I just want to stop and see if there's any questions. And I can't see, I guess, everyone's video. So if I'm missing anything, Brian or someone else, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I don't see any right now.
Okay, great. Okay, so with all of that in mind, we would like to discuss how you want to be engaged in this planning process. So some of you may recognize some of the information on this slide because we discussed this briefly at a meeting back in November. But since there's some new commissioners, we wanted to bring this back and see if people still feel the same about how they want to engage and really come to a decision. So we have come up with 3 different options that you all can consider about how you want to be engaged. And these options reflect ways of engaging that advisory committees like yours usually participate in a citywide planning process. So one is to receive periodic updates during regular Urban Forestry Commission meetings. So that's kind of like what I'm doing right now. Another option is to identify a commission member to join our community advisory committee. And this would be in addition to the slots we'll already have for those community members. So you won't be taking a spot away from someone else. And then last is to create a subcommittee to receive updates and discuss feedback. So this would allow for probably the most level of engagement and could function similarly to how the policy subcommittee functions. But may meet on more of like an ad hoc basis. It may not meet every month. And then the project team for the urban forest plan would come to those meetings and present and provide a more sort of in-depth time and opportunity to provide feedback on different elements of the plan. And then last, I just want to say, in case it's helpful, for the pedestrian plan that was recently adopted and developed by or led by PBOT. Their pedestrian advisory committee chose to have a member sit on their community advisory committee and then have receive regular updates. So sort of a combination of 1 and 2. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion and just say that if we don't come to a decision today, we would like a decision by the next meeting on July 20th. Commissioner Darley.
Maybe you can minimize the slides so we could kind of see the participants and who's questioning. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. I think having representation on the advisory committee is preferable from my point of view, so that we have a voice in real time. I like the combo 1-2 option also. But I fear that not having a presence actively engaged, we may end up in a information lag because of our meeting schedule and some other issues. So if there's something we feel strongly about, I would love to have representation so that they can bring it back as needed, maybe off cycle.
That's great. This seems important enough. I think we should kind of go around and check in with the commissioners, and I don't think we're limited to one option. So it's sort of, we could do all of them. It's a question of bandwidth, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Vandermark, I'll just go around that's okay.
Yeah, I was just going to add that for option 3, creating a subcommittee, what we're envisioning of what this could look like would be to come and give updates around the same time that the project team does that for the technical advisory committee and community advisory committee. So we would try to schedule those meetings so that they're in line to try to address some of those issues that Commissioner Darley was mentioning. But I think, yeah, your statement, Commissioner Darley, that's a good one, just to keep in the loop better.
Can you all hear me? Okay, sorry, I'm terrible with the headset technology thing. I definitely think that I love Darley. I think it's a really important point that you made. I feel like having involvement is important. I hate what I'm about to say, but I could honestly see all 3 being important. I'm like very aware that this has been a passion project for Bruce to really help move this forward. So if Bruce is interested, I'm not volunteering you, Bruce, but if other folks want to be involved, I wouldn't want to not have that option. So if they're, I think at least 1 and 2 and potentially 3. Yeah.
Great. Commissioner Plack.
Yeah, I'll echo what Megan and Darley said. I think it feels much more proactive to be involved in the process, because I fear that if we're not, we're going to be reacting to things, and that will end up taking more time and be less efficient. So I also would say, whichever ones we land on, I do agree that it would be great for commissioners to sort of be involved in the process along the way, not just hearing about things periodically.
Commissioner Lilly.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, there's sort of like we could do all 3 in one form or another. I like the idea of somebody sitting on the committee and kind of really being involved and keeping us looped in as well. And I'm sure there'll still be some updates to the whole commission. So those are like the main thing. I think my question I have is, once the plan is there any checkpoints in the plan process of like that as a commission we vote to support, agree with? So there already is scheduled check-ins, something like that?
I think that's a great idea and question. That would be up to you all of what you would want those to be. I guess I threw out a few ideas in my list of where we might come to you, but I think it's up to you of what you want, what those checkpoints should really be.
Okay, is there like do we officially vote on this or not when it's done, or is that by another body? Is the City of Portland City Commission adopt a plan? Is it our body who recommends it?
Oh,
Brian, do you want to
the final urban forest plan. Yeah, so that would, I believe it would just be adopted through administrative rule. It doesn't require city council approval, but typically with plans of this sort of substance and citywide impact, we would bring it to city council for them to, if not fully implemented, just really offer a sort of endorsement of it.
Okay, so our body would endorse it.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
thank you.
It's a really good point, Commissioner Lilly. I'm sitting here thinking, okay, do we even want to vote on, who's going to represent, for example, who's going to be in the community committee, or, who's going to be on a subgroup, or, but we can decide as we see what the interest is. That, there's no one rule on this. When do we vote? When are we just, doing kind of consensus? But the final sure makes a lot of sense for us to vote.
Yeah, for sure.
Commissioner Clapp.
I don't really have-
Real, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to also mention that even if we have like a representative on the committee, the committee meetings will be open to the public. So as community members, we could still attend and participate. So even though we're not like officially on the committee, we can still all attend the meetings and be engaged as well.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I think I appreciate having, all three, because I do also agree that everyone needs to be, or we as a commission should be on the front side of it rather than reacting like people have brought up. So I think that's, I don't have anything else substantial to add other than yes to all three.
Commissioner Nelson, your thoughts?
My thought is that in light of some of the past discussions, I think if everyone has an opportunity to participate, it may reduce some of the concerns that come up later. So I think opportunities for all is a good thing.
I like version 1 and 2 for real-time updates for the commission so that we're very actively engaged. But we could implement the subcommittee as more of a document and content review.
Yeah.
And so that could be more of a formal, we're going through content and then we use that to communicate. So we're not trying to do all of that in meetings, or that subcommittee has to be at every meeting. It's more of a content review, maybe arm.
So just to clarify, you're saying you like all three, but
I like all three, and it's
focus the
three.
subcommittee on really the nitty gritty document review, et cetera. Yeah.
So it's less about the communication portion, and it's more about content review.
Right. Commissioner Jordan, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would tend to lean toward all three as well. I think they have different roles. The first allows the whole commission to be made apprised of what's going on. In terms of a member on the community advisory committee, I really like that idea, and I would see that role as being more a listener, eyes and ears role. So that person wouldn't be speaking on behalf of the commission because they're participating in a real time meeting. But I think it honors the process, and it also allows that person to bring back issues that they're hearing from the community, and then others who attend as well if they choose to. And then the subcommittee, it seems like would be a real service to the group for those who either don't have time or can't participate, by staying on kind of doing the deeper dives with the staff. I like the idea of having them be maybe the first to review a draft document and then provide feedback to the commission about what they felt was most important for us to know about those documents or to share with the staff. I do think there should be a role for that it wouldn't be totally reactive, that subcommittee, in terms of looking at documents that have already been drafted, but there's a way early on in the process, as Commissioner Plack pointed out, to sort of upfront investment to save time later. There's a time where staff is scoping something or trying to figure something out, that committee might be able to be a sounding board or a support to that process and identifying issues sooner rather than later. But this is a big process. It happens once every 10 years plus. And so I think to the extent that we can pull the bandwidth together to support those functions in some way, that would be great.
Great. Well, I agree with what's been said. Yeah, I think this is a big deal. This is will launch everything else. And so, yeah, maybe what we could do is switch over and talk to, it sounds like there's a lot of interest in doing all three, if there would be volunteers and who that might be. So obviously, we're all gonna get updates, so that would be one. And then the issue of the community committee representative. Anyone have burning interest in being our representative on the community committee?
I wonder if it's possible to, because I know we have a couple commissioners who aren't here. It's
Yes,
possible to save that till we, I don't know, I know there's always.
Sure.
We're not gonna have everybody here next.
that's a good idea.
but Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, maybe Brian, would that be something you could kind of send out an interest
Yeah.
query?
Yeah,
Okay,
and send email
about,
after this,
Awesome.
and we could
Yeah.
decide next month.
great. And then would it be too late for us if there's more, if we're lucky enough to have more than one individual involved?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Should we have more than one rep?
I was just thinking
Yeah.
that, you know, since this process could take 2 years.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
would have, you know, someone who is committing to attend all the meetings and then a backup. You know,
Oh,
so
great
that we always
idea.
have someone present.
Sure,
In case, so it's not just our one person, it's,
right.
we will provide someone to show up to these meetings.
Okay, so we could see if we can sort that out by email, otherwise we can
Sure.
bring it back to the next commission meeting.
Sounds
for
great.
Discussion, if it's, you know, not really clear what the plan should be. Okay, sound good. And then finally, a subcommittee. Do you all want to handle that the same way then? To have a solicitation by email? Yeah.
Sure.
So I had a question. I assumed the policy committee, this would be the issue they would be tackling for the next long period of time. And actually, we've already started very superficial talks. Was it January or something like that? So, but that's so I mean, the policy committee doesn't have to address this. I mean, if there's a different group that UFC wants to focus on this, you know, that's fine if that's the decision. But I certainly saw this as something that is in the purview of a policy committee. But that doesn't have to happen that way. Policy committee meetings are open to the public, they're regular time. But again, it may be that UFC members would prefer something else.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that there are interested commissioners who don't want to be on all the policy things. It may make sense to have a community member or two involved. You know, I'm not sure what that subgroup would think. Well, why don't we see, you know, we'll do the solicitation, see
Yeah.
who's interested, if it's really all subcommittee, you know, policy
Yeah.
committee members who are interested, then there's the answer. If it's really mostly not, then, you know, that's a different answer. So it sounds like we'll probably take it back to this group again.
Yeah, the only thing I was gonna add, I think it could be a lot of work, given what's typically on the policy committee's plate on an ongoing basis with all the other plans and policies for the committee. I think also a standalone committee could be a good opportunity for commissioners who are not already on a committee to participate as well. So just thoughts for that.
Great. Awesome. Any other thoughts on this agenda item? Okay, I think we're running a little ahead. Anyone for a bathroom break? Because the next is at 11. I'm gonna go. So let's just reconvene at 11. Is that good?
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Linda.
we didn't get together. You were,
No, we didn't.
The update on community agreements from the subgroup working on that, Commissioners Bechtel, Lilly, and Jortner. And
Commissioner
who of the
Bechtel
three
was
of
gonna-
you is gonna,
Commissioner Bechtel was gonna lead off.
okay, Commissioner Lilly's leading or Commissioner Bechtel?
Commissioner Bechtel had
Okay,
intended to lead off.
she may have gone.
Wait just 1 minute.
For a second.
Or-
Yeah.
Or Commissioner Lilly could start.
Yeah, do you want to start, Commissioner Lilly, since it's like Darrell Lee is tied up?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Bechtel is going to share the bulk majority of our update, but I just wanted to we just wanted to inform the group that the three of us did meet. We have a draft that we kind of it's more or less brainstorming first draft, which is a long list. But our work is intention to narrow that down. These are just more or less common agreements we've seen in other meetings, and we've talked through what best practices that we've seen. I believe the process is going to be engaging everyone in this group about, once we clean it up the list a little bit more, to then offer it to the group to get for feedback, consideration, and be able to work through. So it's not before we bring it to the group for a final vote and adoption. Commissioner Bechtel, are you here? Okay. Yes, there was some. Oh, there you are.
There she is.
Sorry, it's a walk to the restroom over in the office.
Figured.
Am I up?
Yes.
Yeah, to you.
Thank you. So Commissioners Roberta, JR, and I met to draft some community agreement options for the commission to consider. And as well as some commissioner duties, some options and some language to get us started in our discussions, which we will provide before the July meeting. That's basically all I have. JR, Roberta, do you have anything to add?
Well, Commissioner Lilly did a brief intro before you were able to join in, and so I would just say that it's kind of an exciting thing to be able to think about these together, and it will be a really good and meaningful discussion with the commission as a whole. Looking forward to that.
When do you expect to get a draft that you'd like to share with the whole group?
Yeah, I think we actually will be ready to circulate it starting tomorrow.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. And will you want input by email or, what's the plan from there? Bring it back to the next meeting?
Maybe do that, given that it's not a content policy.
Yeah, I
so
think it'd
if
be
we
okay. Yeah.
Be okay.
If we can begin to
Okay.
solicit some feedback, then we might be able to meet before the next meeting and reshape
Okay.
it a little bit to bring to the group as a whole.
Yeah, I think
That
doing
sounds
that over email should be fine. Yeah. that's
Yeah,
great.
I think that would be a great opportunity to give people some time to noodle on it, suggest some drafting changes or some additions so that we can come to final form and hopefully approve in July would be ideal.
Excellent. Any other thoughts on that, folks? Okay.
Looking forward to your input. Thank you.
It's like Commissioner McMillan is thinking about
Yeah.
something.
No, I was just thinking about the format of it. If community agreements have a portion that's maybe consequences, accountability and consequences that we might
It's
want to
interesting.
consider because we are not, city employees. How would we deal with reprimands or,
Yeah,
sanctions? Like, what would that be? What would that look?
we do have commissioner duties section, which just came out of the brainstorming, and just to frame it for everybody, we just kind of openly got together and had discussions, and I think all of us in the subgroup have community agreements in some other, either in our workplace or in other organizations that we're working with. So we pooled some of that information together just to, because I think creatively it just kind of helps give folks an idea of what types of language are included in these typically, but I think we do have the ability to add to it in a way, consensus, of course, to build our relationship and to formalize it. So we do think that once we come to an agreement on the agreement, that it would be great to start our meetings by reading through some of the ground rules to ground us, to help frame how we will be engaging with each other moving forward. And I think part of the commissioner duties, maybe we can add some accountability components to it. I don't know necessarily that we'd want to add the potential ramifications or consequences in the community agreement itself, but there may be a collateral document that just kind of says, hey, if you are a constant infringer on these community guidelines, or you're not showing up prepared, or you're not meaningfully engaging, here are some things that, we as a group may propose, for example. Like if we have someone that, engages in behavior on a consistent basis that violates our community agreement, we may want to, kind of highlight, here's the actions we can consider and take. And we do that ahead of time to kind of provide the framework and notice to all of us that this is something that could happen, kind of stemming from that 2.02 discussion we had earlier.
Yeah, is there anything like that written at this point? So I'm on the Portland Parks and Rec Board, and they've got, for example, 2 unexcused absences,
Right, yeah.
you're.
That was one thought that I had is the bylaws do detail process. It's really about removal from advisory bodies because members of the UFC, like other advisory bodies, are appointed by the mayor at the recommendation of the commissioner in charge.
Okay.
And then continue to serve at the discretion of the commissioner in charge. So the bylaws do account for, and that's the most extreme scenario, which is removal, usually for things like just they're not attending or they're not participating. And so the community deserves representation in that seat. And so if they're not there, that allows the commissioner in charge just to replace them. I think what we're discussing is probably more along the lines of maybe less punitive, but more just if someone is routinely violating those community agreements, what sort of conversation can be had there, really things that are more appropriate for within the UFC in terms of how respected members are feeling treated by fellow commissioners or staff, and maybe what that sort of conversation can be around bringing activity or behavior that's out of line with those community agreements back in.
Yeah, there's probably, because the community agreement is something newer to the commission, or at least this version of the commission, as far as I'm aware. So the bylaws do have a removal process, and then we have this community agreement, and there's kind of a gap in between.
Right.
And we may want to discuss if there is something or pervasive behavior or violations of the community agreement. Mostly the community agreement is about safety in terms of engagement with each other and the public. And so I think if we'd have to consult the bylaws to see if on the more extreme level, there's anything that the group considers stemming from the community agreement that would trigger going to the removal process or trigger a recommendation for removal. And if there's actually a mechanism in the bylaws for that, or if it really is just already predefined in terms of engagement as a commission member. So I think there's a little bit of gap in terms of research of just closing the loop between community agreement, you know, because I hear when I think it's an escalation, right? There's like different tiers of like corrective action, I guess, which is, you know, hey, that comment you made in the meeting made me feel unsafe, kind of being on one level to the UFC feeling that we need to take some sort of action. So I do think that there's kind of one little question mark out there, which I'm happy to help close the loop for us on that and review the bylaws and make a recommendation as part of this process. But I do think it's dependent on where the discussion goes. And so I'll just be prepared to tell you what I see, not advise legally as a lawyer, but as a commission member, what I'm seeing in terms of what we may need or what authority we may have.
Commissioner Lilly.
Yes, thank you. And I all that was great explanation from everyone. And I think just to highlight that, it's a great question to ask, but that's more of like a step 2. Let's get step 1 of let's get the community agreements of sort of like laying the ground rules of what are we all agreeing to in what are some best practices for having a good conversation. An example might be if somebody disagrees, how do they voice that disagreement and how do we all hear them in their disagreements so it's not contentious and so that we're not making assumptions about it. Like folks are welcome to disagree as part of the conversation. Folks are welcome to engage in conversation and debate, you know, remaining civil and making sure that that doesn't get out of hand or doesn't, you know, cause harm any more so. But we can do that in a civil way. And these community agreements are sort of to help guide that structure along and so that we can all engage in our business correctly. So let's get that together first. And then next steps on like how it's implemented and, you know, updates, schedules, and some of those things can happen. But step 1 first.
Thank you to this committee for doing this difficult work. So we look forward to seeing the draft and coming to some agreements. So the next thing we have on the agenda is future agenda items. Did you want to kick that off at all, or?
Yeah, this was really because we had a somewhat light agenda today, so we had a little time at the end of the meeting. And in the past, where we tried to open it up for just things that the commission would like to see on the agenda at future meetings. So we talked a little bit earlier about maybe a little more information on just the urban forestry program in general. So that's something that we are working on, but yeah, since we have about 15 minutes left in our regularly scheduled meeting time, figured we could just open it up and see if anyone has anything that they'd like to see.
If I could add to what Brian said as well, just a refresher, especially for folks who are newer to the commission, that the commission's overarching role is to advise the city on policies affecting trees citywide. So it's not, for example, about staff organization or day-to-day operations.
Right. Okay, Commissioner Meisner, welcome.
Hey everyone, thanks for letting me join in a little late. Something I would like to talk about in future meetings is our rules around recordings and when the recordings end, and also rules around editing the recordings. I noticed that we had past meetings online that were taken down and then edited and reposted yesterday. So I just think that's something important that we should talk about.
Is there an answer on that already? Because I thought we
Yeah.
were supposed to just end the recording at the end of the formal
Yeah,
meeting.
I can respond to that. So the recordings are not part of Oregon public meetings laws. We keep meeting minutes, and we do have audio recordings as a backup to that. But the recordings are really just something that we started doing in order to promote transparency and just allow for the public to be more aware of the meetings. And that was really facilitated because we're on Zoom. I think in terms of, and I'm actually not aware of many other advisory bodies that post their meetings on YouTube. So I would say the UFC is one of the more transparent. There was one recording after I think the March meeting where the meeting ended, but the recording continued and we posted that without realizing that. And the intention of the recordings on YouTube is not to record private individual conversations that happen outside of a public meeting. Similarly, if there is a break in the meeting like we did today, the intent is not to broadcast private conversations when people are discussing the vacations that they had. That's not intended to be captured on the recording. It's not something we put in the meeting minutes. It's not part of the public record. So there aren't any rules around the recording because that's just something that we've done voluntarily in order to make the UFC meetings and deliberations just more publicly accessible. But they're not necessarily intended to capture, private conversations that aren't part of the public process of the UFC. So I think that, I hope that kind of clears up a little bit of what the role of the UFC recordings are.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just think maybe that as a group, we should come to a decision about how we would like the recordings, just because I think it looks a little untransparent when recordings are getting taken down and edited. But just an idea for the future.
Commissioner Bechtel?
Not to comment on editing of the recordings, but just to recommend a best practice. I think as a best practice, we can avoid some of these issues by getting tighter on our recording and announcing when we're going on the record for participants to know that we are recording, going off the record when we're having breaks, and going back on the record after the break ends, and then going off the record when the meeting ends. And so I think getting tight in our processes will help avoid a lot of these things. Also, if you have participants that, public folks that are engaging on Zoom that are for public comment, or folks that aren't used to this process, or folks that attend in person, just letting them know that they're being recorded also is a good practice, just as a formality. So I think getting tighter around announcing and then also letting folks know perhaps at the beginning of the meeting or the beginning of their testimony, to say, just so you know, this meeting is recorded, and allowing them, putting them on notice. This will help. Hopefully we'll develop good meeting hygiene as a learning experience from this, and then hopefully we won't have these issues in the future. This is a recommendation. And maybe we could fold it into our community agreement, one of the subparts about how we resolve some of these things and how we want to conduct the meeting and recording.
Nice.
That's a great point.
Commissioner Clapp?
Yeah, I think it'd be important to talk about the Heritage Tree Program as a agenda item. Obviously, for the last several months, it's been a huge issue, and a lot of people brought up things particular to the program itself. And I think it would be good for us to sit down and brainstorm, talk about how we could recommend new changes, new policies that also just kind of give it a review and say, well, what is working, what's not working, what failed where in any given situation, and try to figure out if we can build that program in a way that would be more equitable according to whoever is looking at it at the time to try to figure out if we can keep it as appropriate as possible, but also have the intention of the program be followed through.
That's great.
Yeah, also Mike was having very similar thoughts. That was the one I was gonna suggest, and maybe we could take a moment to just say, okay, who do we need to have come? You know, what does that all involve? You know, we had obviously this difficult issue around the heritage tree. And, you know, things didn't, in my view, work well for anyone involved. I mean, for the family, for the tree, or for the commissioners. And, you know, so what, you know, who do we need to, do we have the heritage tree commission come? There's no director, is that the case? It's just administrator over it?
There's a volunteer committee that works with staff.
Right.
So we have a staff lead program, and currently we don't have one. That's
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay. So who would come then? The city staff person?
I think it'd be
Is
a
it still Nick?
presentation.
No, it is it's moved on to other projects. And as I said, we're working on hiring a person who will have a portfolio. Among the things in their portfolio will be the heritage tree program.
Okay.
So yes, they may be involved, or their supervisor and or manager. And we could present like what the program is first, perhaps, so folks know about it.
Right.
And then have
Right.
discussions.
Right, it would be good to have some history too, do you know what I mean? Someone who has some knowledge of the history in addition to a city staff person.
As I was going to suggest that it would be helpful to have one or two of the volunteers on that committee. They've been involved for many years and worked really, really hard, and I think have a lot more history and context than certainly any of us do. And just to have, you know, to honor their role as well as a staff person.
Sure.
If they're available as well to augment that.
Yeah, that's great.
And in addition, I like the idea of bringing the 82nd Avenue and 122nd Avenue
Yeah, for sure.
programs and projects to the commission. I love the idea of a field trip. And I think it would be neat to couple that with perhaps meeting with, depending on where we go, maybe some community members in that geography that could be on that.
I think that's a great idea.
Commissioner Vandermark, I think you were next, and then Commissioner Meisner and Commissioner Lilly. I'm sorry if I got the order wrong. I wasn't watching the hands carefully.
All good.
So I'm going in the order of the screen.
I'll try to be succinct. I think a couple things. One, I do like the idea that we talked about earlier, so just wanted to elevate it of having different urban forestry staff and come and present when we have slow time to learn more about the program. There's a lot happening, and I even work adjacent and still don't know everything that's happening. So that'd be great. I know that we've talked about this in the past, and you know, full disclosure, I work for Friends of Trees, so I'm not talking about us and what I'm saying here, but I'd love to have other community groups. This is something that we've talked about that are doing work adjacent to urban forestry or in partnership with urban forestry. Maybe they can come and give a presentation during those times as well. And then the final thing, I know that we've talked at different points over the years, we should always revisit, but like, about commissioner priorities. So I think maybe unearthing what that document to help inform what some of our topics are, because it's a space that people have talked about what their priorities are. And if everyone that's new to the commission hasn't weighed in, then let's find out what their priorities are so that can help drive the agenda. Okay, all done.
That's great. Usually that's a retreat, you know, item, but there's no reason why it can't be an agenda item.
For sure.
Yeah, great. Commissioner Meisner.
Yeah, item I would like to discuss in the future is, I think I mentioned it last meeting, that Parks and Rec is building like a $50 million pool, and depending on which park they place it in, anywhere from like 10 to like up to 40 trees could be cut down. And so I was hoping we could discuss that and maybe write a recommendation letter to Parks.
Commissioner Lilly.
Yes, two things. One, would like to invite my fellow commissioners and any staff to the Delta Park powwow this weekend. I'll be there, so you need a powwow buddy. You're not going to be going, you won't be strangers. And I think that's a good community involvement connection point. So invite anyone to participate. And I think future meeting, we have a great hive mind within our commissioners that to bring a lot to the table. And I always appreciate different types of education, even if it's like a 5-10 minute, like what's your favorite tree and why, and learning more about that. And even like the critters and the bugs and the benefits of it. The more information I get about it, the importance of trees, the more I'm able to advocate in my communities and circles and things, like why this is why we do it in Portland and things. So yeah, there's some fun, just some thoughts.
Good. Can you give us the hours of the powwow? Or maybe put it in the chat or something?
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Plack.
Yeah, I think this folds in with the field trip idea, and I'm always interested in seeing examples of high density housing and trees coexisting. And so wherever we can fit that in, I know that that might be more private property, not so much the city's projects, but I just think having that vision in our minds is so helpful when we advocate, so that it doesn't turn into that either or conversation that we always keep hearing about. We need housing. It's like, yes, we do, but we can be creative and have housing and access to green spaces and healthy places for people to live. So wherever we can see those really cool examples in person, I think that would be amazing.
I was just gonna say, well, one, maybe Commissioner McMillan should give recommendations of projects through her line of work, but that could be a great thing to do jointly with the city's planning commission. I'm thinking we haven't done something like that before, but their role in terms of this Title 33 city's land use code is very determinative of what those kind of developments actually look like. So yeah, that's a great idea. It might be something we can talk to their staff about for sure.
And they also have a role in any amendments to Title 11.
Yeah.
So that fits well together.
My agenda item would be that, all of this education, just like education moments, even in our agenda, to better help us understand our advisory role and to better be better educated with the systems within the city, within the department. How are they working? As far as, just make us better commissioners. So we're educated, and I can spout off my favorite tree. Don't get me wrong, I want a favorite tree like agenda item, but that's not helping me be like understanding my role in as an advisory.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you.
Good. Something that Merrill Reddish was very good at, and I don't know that we've routinely done it since, is she had a way of meeting with city commissioners on a regular basis. And it was not when a crisis occurred, but she already had a relationship. And it was very helpful, at least from what she said, when issues came up around trees. There was a little bit more of an open door, a relationship, and so the conversations were a little easier. We just wait for a crisis to try to get a meeting with Commissioner Ryan or Rubio or the mayor. It's harder because all of a sudden it's a stranger coming in. So, but it's, it takes time, somebody who's comfortable with doing that. But I know Merrill thought that was really invaluable, and I think she is keeps reminding different people that was a good thing to do. Why don't you do it again? So it's a discussion item.
For those who don't know, Meryl Reddish is a former commission member and chair, and she also serves on the policy committee now. She's no longer in that role. You know, it reminds me, we did have that visit with Dan Ryan. We did suggest that perhaps we could have periodic check-ins with him, and maybe we could, in a future agenda, brainstorm together about what we'd like to raise to Commissioner Ryan as a topic, and who might want to go visit with them and their staff.
Great.
Okay, guys, well, we're out of time. Thanks for those. There's some really great potential agenda items, and it's always an open door to receive, you know,
Yes.
emails or bring them up at meetings. And thank you so much for attending today, and we'll see each other next month, correct?
Great.
Take care.